Great. And that is my first housekeeping item. So we are recording this webinar and it will be posted on our website on the speaker series page of the website on Monday. So if you need to step away or drop off the call, no worries. You can catch up on the presentation next week. And again, for any questions, there should be time at the end of Dr. Van Horn's presentation for some questions. And so if you put those in the chat, we'll keep track of those and ask them for you. And that will bring us to our first announcement. If I can scroll through here. Okay, here we go. All right, so first off, if you're coming to us for the first time, I want to extend a warm welcome. This is our monthly free public speaker series, and we are able to provide this to y'all for free because of the generosity of our members. And so if you are not a member, I highly encourage you to check out the website and become a member. We keep our membership fees very low, just $25 a year for students and seniors, $35 for the rest of folks. And if you can afford it and want to support the work we do at a higher level, we also have higher level memberships. And next up is Birdathon. So it's that time of year almost. We are about to start our next annual Birdathon season, which is our biggest fundraiser of the year, starting at the end of February here. There will be an announcement email sent out, as well as the brochure for our adventure tours. So stay tuned for your email and physical mail inboxes. We will have our series of adventure tours. We'll set folks up with Pledge It for peer-to-peer fundraising. One big announcement and big change this year is that the Bay Birding Challenge, which is our one-day big day style competition, will actually be all 9 counties of the Bay Area. So if you want to make your day even bigger, or you want to bird outside of the county you live in, that's an exciting new development with our Bay Birding Challenge. And then, of course, we'll have our auction and our celebration in May. So stay tuned for more. So each season, we offer a slate of classes that sort of dive deeper into various birding topics. And there are still room in these upcoming spring classes. So we have beginning birding in San Francisco, birding by ear in San Francisco and Marin, birding your patch, which is a wonderful, relatively new class where you really dive into a particular place and see that through a season. Bird photography workshop, which we're really excited to offer, and birds in the Anthropocene, which is taught by some grads from UC Berkeley here that are now instructors for GGBA. So check this out on our website and sign up for classes. They fill fast. All right. So our Indigenous stewardship news. Every month, we like to highlight important environmental news related to Indigenous tribes in our area. And so just over a week ago, we learned a large parcel of land, including forests, meadows, and other critical wildlife habitat, was purchased by the Washoe tribe of Nevada and California. They are the ancestral caretakers of that land. And the land will now be held in the tribe's Washoe Trust. So in just a minute, I'll put a link to the story so you can read more about this really great land back story. All right, and now on to our Travel with GGBA program, and I will hand it over to Eric to do this announcement.
Thanks, Whitney. Hi, everybody. I'm one of the 2 people who run our travel program, and if some of you have been to the website lately, you'll know that this year filled up very, very fast. We still have a few trips at the end of the year, though. We have 3 trips that start at the end of October and go into November, and they all overlap. So if you want to travel, then you're only going to get to pick one of them. but one of them we just added just 2 or 3 days ago to Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. And we ran a version of this about 4 years ago, and I did Namibia, Botswana. We didn't get as far as Victoria Falls on that. It was a wonderful trip. I really recommend it. And we still have room on the Tasmania Endemics trip. And we don't have a slide for it, but we added a second section of our trip to Brazil, the Pantanal, and Argentina, which is the Atlantic forest. So that the first one filled up. We've got about 4 spaces left on the second one. And we still have one spot left on this Bhutan trip for the fall dates. It coincides with the Crane Festival in Bhutan. So if you want that spot, you better grab it, because I think after tonight, somebody will take it. Starting at the beginning of next year, we're going to run Minnesota Owls again. We just finished that one this year. Apparently, it was really cold there this year. They did, though, get all of the owls they hope to see. So that trip's been really successful the last few years we run it. We have a couple of brand new trips that we're running for the first time next year. This one in Transylvania, and that's actually filling pretty quickly. We've only got 2 spots left. And then we have another one called Islands and Highlands of Scotland that we're running for the first time. We've got another one that didn't make it on the slide, to Spain and Gibraltar, that we're running for the first time. So in addition to that, we'll be posting the usual trips we have. I think our annual Colombia trip is already up. We'll be doing California deserts again. So we'll be doing some of the favorites we always do. But we really wanted to call your attention to these new ones while there's still some spaces. Thank you. And Whitney, are you going to announce Bob's talk later?
Yes, absolutely. Coming up next.
Okay. Or I'll play. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, these trips are so wonderful. I strangely could not convince my husband to go to Minnesota in winter. But for those who are more intrepid, highly recommend. I heard a lot of great things from that trip. Okay, so next up, excuse me. The tech. I think my computer is just being very slow. Okay, here we go. So next month, we have two, not one, but two in person, as well as Zoom, speaker series. Both at the David Brower Center here in downtown Berkeley, where our offices are, as well as on Zoom. The first one will be on Thursday, March 12th. And that will be the one and only Bob Lewis, and he will be presenting on taking us around the world in 80 birds. So really looking forward to that. For these in-person ones, we hope you will join us here in person at the David Brower Center. And if you do, please do register in advance so we can prepare for how many people are going to be here. But do know that it will also be online. And then also in March, the following week, but at the same time and same place, we'll have author and conservationist Jeff Miller to talk about his book, Bay Area Wildlife: An Irreverent Guide, which goes over the ecology and the antics of the Bay Area's most charismatic wildlife species. So again, please register in advance if you plan to join us in person, which we hope you do. Otherwise, you can hop on the Zoom as you are tonight. Okay, that concludes our announcements. So it is my great honor to introduce Dr. Grant Horn. He is a machine learning researcher at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where he works on sound ID and image recognition models to use in the Merlin ID app. His work focuses on building practical tools that help people engage with nature. Grant received his PhD from Caltech, where he studied how to train and deploy large-scale machine learning models on mobile devices. The work that contributed to these technologies are now what we use on iNaturalist, Seek, and Merlin. He is currently on leave from University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he is an assistant professor of computer science. Please welcome Dr. Grant Van Horn. I'm gonna stop sharing my slides and allow you to do so.
Awesome. Thank you, Whitney.
And
okay.
While he does that, I'll just remind folks that if you have any questions during the presentation, please throw them into the chat and we'll get to them at the end.
Cool. All right. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Whitney. My name's Grant. Like like Whitney was saying, I'm currently on leave from UMass and back focused 100% on Lab of O projects, where Merlin Sound ID is one of those principal projects. I'll be talking about that tonight. I actually grew up in California, so I didn't grow up in the Bay Area. My family and I were all from Bakersfield, and I did all my schooling in San Diego and then Los Angeles. So yeah, it's fun to be back talking with the California crowd this evening. Hopefully, folks know about Merlin. If not, I find it to be a really convenient app for identifying the birds around you. This feature that I'll be talking about tonight is kind of best described as Shazam for birds. So we started working on this project back in 2020 is when we got pretty serious about it, and it's been continuing ever since. And so yeah, during this talk, I'll kind of go into the under the hood of what's happening on the phones when you run the Sound ID feature in Merlin, and how we create that model using the data and resources at Cornell, and then what is kind of the future of the project. And it's a free app, so if you don't have it and you'd like to get it, it's easy to grab off of either the Play Store or the App Store. Um, but first, I just want to give a shout out to the fact that this is I'm delighted to give this talk. It's I really enjoy these types of engagements with the community, but I'm just one person of many that work on this project. Um, and probably there's many people in this audience that have contributed in some way to Sound ID, whether that's through just contributing eBird checklists or submitting audio with those checklists, or maybe there's even some annotators in the crowd. And if so, huge hats off to you for getting this project to where it is today. But besides the birding community, there's a whole bunch of folks at Cornell that work together to make this thing possible. So I'll start with kind of the basics, and then we'll go into the kind of the more nitty-gritty of the actual machine learning system. But we're interested in recognizing the vocalizations of different bird species. So kind of in this cartoon, we've got our sparrow vocalizing. That noise is going to hit your microphone, which in this case is going to be on your cell phone. And your microphone is a transducer. It's going to convert that mechanical energy, those waves, sound waves that the bird is producing, into an electrical signal that we can then process digitally. So this is what you're seeing on the left-hand side here is a waveform. So it's a one-dimensional signal of amplitude over time. Now, what we're going to do for Sound ID is take that waveform and convert it into an image, which we call a spectrogram. And this is that visualization that scrolls across the screen when you start the Sound ID feature in Merlin. And so this is what gives you those really pretty, I think they're really pretty visualizations of the different vocalization types. So you'll be seeing spectrograms throughout this talk, and it's there's many ways of thinking about them, but I just like to think of them as images. We're taking sound and we're converting it into an image format, which turns it into a visual problem. So my background is actually in computer vision, not necessarily audio processing. But as soon as I can get audio into more of a picture representation, I can then use the toolkit that's available to most vision researchers. For this is these like little animations built on top of each other. This next one is no longer like GIF. I have to switch over to a video, but we have the same things. We have that same audio feed coming in, being converted into a spectrogram. And here I just want to show kind of what Sound ID is actually doing kind of behind the scenes, again, on your phone still. So this upper left-hand tile is kind of like what you see scrolling across. the interface in the app, and this little bar graph down on the bottom right is the results table that you would see. But this is kind of a debugging view, if you will. So I'll play this video. And a few things to point out is, and I'll just pause this. So the visualization up here is constantly streaming, right? Audio is sound is constantly hitting your microphone. We're constantly converting it into an image, and that's kind of nicely, smoothly scrolling across your screen. The model runs at 1 second. So every second we grab a snapshot, an image, if you will, of the current sound representation. And this is what Merlin, quote unquote, sees to try and figure out what's currently vocalizing. So we take, and in this visualization, we're assuming we get to process about 3 seconds of audio. So every second, Merlin gets to like kind of look at the last 3 seconds of audio that has come in through your microphone, and it's trying to analyze literally kind of the pixels to see which birds are present. And you'll see, I'll play the video, but you'll see this bar chart change. And in the app, you get the little results that highlight in yellow, and this bar plot is effectively trying to show that. So we can let this go, and we can see our Buick's wren in the background vocalizing. Here comes our grosbeak and our spotted towhees. So this is kind of the like debugging view of Sound ID, right? We have audio coming in. We have the UI component that the user gets to look at, which is kind of these two pieces with the bar chart and the UI spectrogram, and then the model is actually processing this. So when I refer to spectrograms throughout the rest of this talk, I'm really talking about this kind of input that the model, in which case I'll also call the model just Merlin itself. This is what Merlin gets to look at to try and figure out what's currently vocalizing. Okay, so Merlin Sound ID is a machine learning project, and as such, it's a very iterative process. So we start with collecting audio, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has been collecting audio almost for 100 years now. So coming up on in 2029 will be kind of the hundredth year of audio collection, which is pretty cool. The first collection was back in 1929. But the lab has been collecting audio for a long time. We sample from that pool of audio, and I'll go into more detail about that. And we annotate the vocalizations that we find in those recordings. We take those annotations and we teach Merlin what the different birds sound like, or again, in another way, what their vocalizations look like in spectrograms. And then we test Merlin like crazy, try and poke and prod it and figure out where it's doing well and where it's not doing well. And we take those lessons and we repeat this whole cycle. So for the rest of this talk, I'll kind of just go through steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it's useful to know that we do this process on like a weekly basis. We're constantly collecting more data through the eBird community. We're constantly annotating that data. We are reteaching Merlin what the different birds sound like, what new birds that we're introducing to the model sound like, and then we're constantly testing to figure out where we can improve. Okay, so let's talk about collecting audio. And again, this comes from folks like yourselves. The Merlin Sound ID project is built exclusively off of the Macaulay Library, and the Macaulay Library is predominantly eBird audio files. We have some legacy recordings from folks that had contributed stuff before eBird had existed, but by and large, all of our data is coming directly from the eBird community, and so these are folks that are out, some that are just recording on cell phones, some that have, parabolas or shotgun mics and more specialized equipment, but, we will certainly utilize whatever the community can get outside and collect for us. But from the field, hopefully some of this looks familiar to those who use eBird in the audience. From the field, you can come back and you can add media to your checklist. So in this case, I grabbed a recent screenshot of someone's checklist from the San Francisco area where they had recorded a great horned owl this week. And so they've added that audio to the checklist and submitted it. And that audio ultimately gets stored in what we call the Macaulay Library. This used to be called the Library of Natural Sounds, which is kind of another fun name for it. Um, but this archive is a huge warehouse, so to speak, of bird videos, images, and audio recordings. And we are expanding, or yeah, we can certainly support other taxonomic groups as well, but birds are the main focus. And so it's from the Macaulay Library that I ultimately sample a bunch of these audio files to teach Merlin what these birds sound like. Um, and this data set, what you're going to see here is just a black rectangle filled in with little yellow dots where we get recordings. And you'll see that as this animation progresses, the world will pop out, the different countries. And this is just to sort of show you the data is, and this is kind of the ending animation there. So that, by the time you reached 2024, 2025, this is what we're looking at. And again, this is where we've got audio files to play with. So if I had done this for the eBird database itself, which is just checklists, even the world would be glowing even more. Right? This is a subset of the eBird checklists that have audio associated with them. And for this group, one thing I like to point out is like there's an obvious bias, right, to this data, right? United States is of all the countries, United States is sort of the best filled out. And so that's where we have kind of the most data to play with. But Merlin is not meant for just working well in the United States. We want this thing to work well for anybody, any birder, in any country. And so I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but one of our big goals right now is just expansion. With Africa being a huge target, mainly for just getting raw audio recordings from the community there, building up the community in the first place, and then getting folks outside recording audio. But um, I was told that maybe some of the people in the audience would be interested in kind of the limitations of Merlin. And I'll just kind of flag them as we encounter them. But one limitation is the bias of the data that we have to sample from. It is predominantly from the United States. It's predominantly from the Northern Hemisphere. It's predominantly from kind of the Northern Spring periods, right? So like all of these kind of data biases affect the performance of the model. And so if you travel from California to other parts of the world and you're noticing that sound ID doesn't quite work as well, it's because we're still trying to collect data and fill those gaps. So how much data do we have to play with? We've Not every recording in the Macaulay library is sort of eligible to be used for Sound ID. We have certain requirements. One of them, for example, being that we like to work with audio files that are at least 9 seconds long. Some people like to give us very cropped audio files, and we appreciate that, but we really want to get a little bit more context. What did the environment sound like? And so we're really looking for audio that has at least 9 seconds in duration, and preferably 30 seconds or a minute. With several vocalizations of the target species. So when you kind of do some trimming and subsampling, we have a bit over 2 million audio files that we like to work with to build up this data set. Those 2 million files are not distributed evenly across all of the bird species of the world, right? You just saw that from that map visualization that a lot of our data is from the United States. So while we have audio coverage for most bird species in the world, when we train, and more importantly, when we evaluate the performance of Sound ID, we really need, we want lots of files. We want lots of recordings to do that type of work. And so we're really looking for birds to have, we're excited when they cross 100 recordings. A particular species gets 100 recordings, and then really it's more like 150 to 250. That's when we're in really good shape to really study how well Merlin is performing on that particular species. So, when we look at that 150 number, we're down to about 2,000 species. And the current production model that you would get from the App Store or the Play Store covers, I believe, just over 2,000 species, right? And so, again, another one of these limitations, like why doesn't Merlin just work for all the birds of the world right now? Well, we just don't have kind of the amount of data that we need in order to first teach Merlin what that bird sounds like. But again, more importantly, we don't have the data to evaluate if Merlin learned anything reasonable about it. So this is why this is an iterative project, and it's been going for 6 years now, and it will go for probably another 6 years before we have quite a bit better coverage. Um, and again, kind of another visualization of this to emphasize this uh, non-uniform distribution of the audio recordings per species. So red crossbill for various reasons is the species with the most number of audio recordings in the Macaulay Library. Um, the species that just crossed over the 1,000 asset mark most recently is Lucy's warbler, which is maybe a species that some of you guys have seen over in California. And then the species that most recently crossed the 100 asset mark is this pied oyster catcher. So again, we're this. These species down here, kind of, they slowly get more data from the community, and as they cross these various thresholds, we can then kind of spend time and effort on those birds to bring them into the Merlin Sound ID app. Okay, so let's like some species have lots of data. So we actually, so like, many species don't have enough data for us to work with yet, but there are some species that have plenty of data for us to sample from. So yellow rump warbler is one such species. Each dot here is an audio recording from the Macaulay Library that we could use to teach Merlin. We don't need 3,000 audio files for this species, so we subsample it into training examples and test examples. And we do this in a very careful way to try and cover the species distribution across space, right? So across, in this case, the United States, and time. So trying to get audio recordings that were recorded in January, as well as in May and September and October and et cetera. So we want as much kind of coverage of that species variability as we can. And we build up what we term as training data sets and testing data sets. And once we've done that sampling, so once we've selected those recordings, we then go and annotate them. And there's a reasonable question is like, why annotate vocalizations? And so I feel like kind of the best way to answer this is by demonstration. So I actually think I might not have shared my audio. So let me stop sharing and share this audio so you guys can hear it. Okay, so I'm gonna play about 30 seconds of this audio, and I want you to just kind of listen to the various bird species in there. And um, actually, I forget whether this is the yellow rump warbler recording, but I forget if it's from the East Coast or the West Coast. But pretend trying to learn from this recording, just from having someone give it to you and be like, this is what a yellow rump warbler sounds like, right? And then all you get is this audio file. Okay, so if you know what a yellow rump warbler sounds like, you know that species is in there, but there's a whole bunch of other species in there as well. Right, so like just being given that audio file and being told that there's a yellow rump warbler in there is like pretty confusing and pretty hard to learn from. So now we're going to listen to the exact same clip, but this time there's going to be some extra annotations that an expert has provided to help you learn what are the different birds vocalizing in this file, which one of them is a yellow rump warbler, but then there's also other species. Okay, so hopefully using those boxes and the audio together helps you understand like what was going on, and maybe that helps you realize that the yellow rump warbler was those strong chip notes. And then in the background you have your vesper sparrow and your northern cardinal and your red-winged blackbird, right? But it was with those boxes that you're able to kind of like piece together all that information, and really kind of learn what each bird sounded like. So this is the reason we annotate this data. So this is another little animation of one of our experts going through and drawing boxes on the spectrogram. And these boxes are just used to tell Merlin, like, this is what, in this case, an elegant trogon sounds like. It's not these other sections. It's this particular part of the audio, that that represents the signal for this bird. Um, and um, this is a very difficult task. Like I have incredible respect for the annotators that are going through and doing this. I mean, the amount of expertise that they bring to bear to draw all these different boxes from different parts of the world, whether or even just from their backyard, is incredibly impressive, right? So this is from one of our annotators, Taylor Brooks, and she's just an amazing birder by ear. And what you're seeing in this slide is just all these different vocalizations that she's able to identify down to species, and then draw the boxes on them. So, and this is just one file. Again, we've been working on this project for about the last 6 years. Over that course of time, there's only been 415 annotators that have drawn boxes on these audio files. So it's a task that we haven't necessarily like advertised to the broader community, mainly because it requires so much expertise that we kind of like do it through friends of friends. We figure out, who knows their birds by ear in a particular area. We reach out to them. A lot of them are like, we start with the eBird reviewer community. When we ask them, like, who are the people that could like listen to audio and tell us what are the different species that are vocalizing. And so it's a very much kind of a word of mouth type approach to finding these folks who can spend the time to do that level of annotation that we need. These folks have drawn 4.5 million boxes on 366,000 audio recordings, and they have covered uh, over 5,600 bird species, which is just incredible given like where we started from. So again, that we have data, we have boxed vocalizations for 5,600 species, but that doesn't mean that Merlin knows about all those species. We only train and evaluate it on species that we have enough data to do, sufficient evaluation processes. Species with the most boxes, so red-winged blackbird has over 33,000 of those boxes for it. Rufous collared sparrow, which is a very common sparrow down in South America, has 31,000, and then northern cardinal has 29,000. And so again, you can kind of see this U.S. Canada kind of bias with red-winged blackbird and northern cardinal. I was really excited when rufous collared sparrow crept into the top three because it showed that we were expanding into other parts of the world. Um, and then we encounter species, so to speak, on a regular basis. So, today we got our first box for this grosbeak that I believe actually occurs maybe in the Atlantic forest for the folks that are going on that trip. And then yesterday we got our first box for this Somali tit. So I'm not sure if either of these birds are necessarily like focus species where we're really trying to add them, but these were probably background species in recordings, and so we got our first boxes for these guys. Okay, so now we've seen that we can collect audio, and then the next step is to go through and annotate those vocalizations. And again, so that the collection is a huge community effort. Any eBirder can participate there, and then the annotation kind of funnels it down to sort of this subset of incredibly good ear birders. We then take that data and we're going to teach Merlin. And um, it's in some sense very kind of a simple recipe, or I'm hoping that you'll find it sort of simple and easy to understand. We're going to take our audio which is variable length. But if you remember back from the very first kind of sequence of animations, right, the Merlin Sound ID model, it analyzes 3 seconds of audio every second. So at 1 second, it gets kind of the latest 3 seconds of audio, and it's trying to tell us what birds are vocalizing in that 3 seconds. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to take our training data and chop it up into what we call little clips. And for the sake of this, the sequence of slides, it looks like I switched to 2 seconds of audio. So our full audio clip is, we call it windowing. We windowed it into little 2 second clips. And we propagated the boxes down. And so this little kind of cartoony R2D2 slash bird icon is what we use for kind of the Merlin Sound ID logo internally. So we're going to take our example and we're going to show it just the audio, right? I mean, when you're running Sound ID on your phone, it's not like someone is telling Merlin what birds are there. So we just get to feed Merlin the audio, just like you would get on your phone. And Merlin needs to output those species that have boxes in the associated training example. And it not only does it need to tell us which birds are present, it needs to tell us all the birds that are absent. And so, one important difference. So maybe folks in the audience are, familiar with image classification type stuff, or face recognition, where if you got my little if you took a screenshot of my Zoom window and you ask like, who is this person? That task is like, you need to classify it down to one person. You need to say that's Grant. With the audio, it's not that we're ever asking Merlin to say, what is this one bird? We're asking Merlin, what are all the birds present in this particular audio segment, right? So it needs to tell us that there's both a ruby crowned kinglet and a red-winged blackbird vocalizing, and then meanwhile, there's nothing else. So in machine learning terms, this is a multi-label problem as opposed to sort of just pure classification. And we'll just cycle through these different examples. And we do this over and over and over. And we actually just finished a model finish training this afternoon. And it's something like 100 years. If a human sat down and listened to all the audio that we had just passed through the Merlin model, it'd be like 100 years of sitting down and listening to the different bird vocalizations. So it's a lot of data. But we in the models themselves. So I know there's a lot of conversations about sort of the energy usage of language models and some of these other machine learning techniques these days. The Sound ID model, because it needs to run on phones, is actually a very lightweight and pretty efficient system. The compute resources that we use to train this thing are actually just at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's a few servers that we have in-house. Okay, so that process of showing these audio examples to Merlin and then just getting it to predict what the experts labeled as being present and absent in that audio file is the process of teaching Merlin. And now we can turn around and test it. So I often get these questions on like, how accurate is Sound ID? And it's a funny question because it's a little bit like asking how accurate are you at listening, right? It's just like a oddly phrased question. More what we ask is, how often is Sound ID correct when it shows a result? Or how many vocalizations does Sound ID detect, right? Like those are questions that we can answer. But it's often not the way people initially think to ask about the performance of the system. And I'll talk about why we focus on sort of these types of questions. So, the test set is a bit like a quiz that you would get in school or something, right? Like you never got to see these questions. You did get sample homeworks to learn from, but then when you go into class to take your test, you never got to see those questions. And we do the same thing with Merlin. So we hold out audio recordings that it never sees, They're completely disjoint from the training data set. They're not even on. They don't even get to belong to the same checklist, right? So we actually split. So for the eBirders in the audience, we split on checklists. So all of the audio files from a particular checklist have to go either into the training pool or in the evaluation pool. There could be no kind of cross contamination because we really want to know how good is the Sound ID model, because that's how we make decisions about whether a bird can be released to the public or not. So assume that all these little clips here, and again, these can be just like examples that we've been seeing all along, are from our test set, and everything in the left-hand side here has a northern cardinal vocalization present, and everything in the right-hand side does not have a northern cardinal, right? So an expert has listened to this audio, an expert human has listened to this audio and has told us which ones have and do not have northern cardinal. Now let's say we run the Sound ID model on this test set, and Sound ID comes back and it tells us that these 12 tiles that have a blue border have northern cardinal. One thing that we'd like to ask is, sort of those clips predicted as Northern Cardinal or predicted to have a Northern Cardinal vocalization, what fraction of them actually have a Northern Cardinal vocalization? So if we come back to our sort of our little visualization, we know that this side all have Northern Cardinal vocalization. So now those blue borders turn to green, and we know that this side did not. So these guys get red. And this fraction is green divided by green plus red, and that value is what we call precision. So this particular model of Sound ID had a precision of 0.75 on its northern cardinal prediction. So every time it showed for across all of the detections where it said a northern cardinal was present, it had a precision of 0.75. Now, if this was the only metric we cared about, it'd be very easy to game this metric and get something that looks really impressive, right? So I could easily create a model that only ever predicts kind of one time for Northern Cardinal, only when it's like ultra, ultra, ultra confident, right? And so given that definition of precision, we have green divided by green plus red. There were no red, right? So now it's just green divided by green, which is always one. So you have perfect precision, right? And so precision can only ever range from 0 to 1. It's like a fraction, or like a percentage. And so, 1 is perfect, right? And so in this case, it looks like Merlin Sound ID is perfect, but in reality, Merlin missed all of these other Northern Cardinal vocalizations. So this is actually not the type of system we want to deploy in the Merlin app, because this wouldn't lead to a very good user experience. You would very rarely get your Northern Cardinal result when that bird was vocalizing. Okay, so all these orange ones were missed, right? Which is not a good system. So we can't just optimize for precision. So the other question we can ask is what fraction of the Northern Cardinal vocalizations are detected? All right, so coming back, these were our original set of detections from this hypothetical Merlin Sound ID model. And when we try to answer that question, we now just focus on the set that actually have a Northern Cardinal. And the fraction that we're interested in is green divided by green plus orange. And this, kind of in the stats or machine learning community, is called recall. And this metric kind of helps tell us, if all of those Northern Cardinal vocalizations that were in our test set, how many did the Merlin Sound ID model pick up? Right. And then again, this value goes from 0 to 1. And we would love to have a system that operates at a recall of 1. It's getting every time a Northern Cardinal is vocalizing, the system is detecting it. That would be great. That's actually very easy to do. If this was the only metric I cared about, I would just always predict Northern Cardinal. That would get me to a perfect recall value, because this is all we'd absolutely pick up all of these guys. We'd have green divided by green. We're back to 1. This looks amazing. But again, we didn't actually solve the problem because Merlin would be predicting everything as containing a Northern Cardinal, right? And that's not a good user experience either. So what we really want to do is we want to look at both of these metrics. We want to be looking at precision when it actually says Northern Cardinal, how correct is it? And we want to be looking at recall. How many of the Northern Cardinal vocalizations is this thing picking up? So And that's exactly what we do when we look at the performance of a particular bird species. We're looking at how well is it doing on precision, and 0.75 is quite low, right? We want birds to have a precision of 0.9, 0.95, or even higher, right? Because that means that like when we show a result, it's often correct. It's not always correct. Merlin makes mistakes. I mean, I'm sure everyone in the audience who's used Merlin has seen a mistake come up. Um, but we have to balance that. We could make precision perfect, right? We could do it. It's a knob that we get to turn. But the downside is that always that like tanks our recall, right? So it's always this trade-off between precision and recall. Um, so for every bird, each dot here represents a bird species in one of the in this case, this is a model that was trained on about 2,000 different species. So each bird we can compute its precision and its recall, and we can plot it in this scatter plot. Now, birds that are up in this upper right-hand quadrant, they're doing great. They've got high precision and they've got high recall. We expect users to have a really good experience with those birds. Birds in these two quadrants either have a high precision, which is great, but maybe they have a little bit lower recall. All right, so not every time the bird vocalizes is Merlin kind of flashing the detection. So we'd like to make that bird better. Other birds have the recall that we want, but maybe not quite as much precision. And then birds in this red or pink quadrant, those are the birds that we spend a lot of time working on, right? There's something, we're not getting the precision we want and we're not getting the recall we want. And so we need something got to change. And um, this is why, again, this is like an iterative project. You don't just train Merlin once and call it good. You train it, you look at these types of plots and you figure out like, oh, okay, what's going on with these species? How can we improve them? We'll go look into one of these dots. I believe this one that my cursor on is Northern Mockingbird. And I'm sure folks can appreciate why we have low performance on that bird, and we'll look at a visualization here in a second. Um, Okay, so that was the full cycle, right? So we went from collecting audio to annotating that audio to using it to teach Merlin to then going deep into testing Merlin and figuring out what is its precision and recall. And again, these little arrows are super important. We just like we learn our lessons, we figure out which birds are not performing well, and we figure out like, can we collect some more audio for those things? Can we annotate some more data for them? Let's once we do those operations, let's reteach Merlin and let's see how the system improves. Um, and so that's kind of that those options kind of go into this sort of we you often have dealing with a machine learning system, you usually have two levers that are at your disposal, right? Like you can often iterate on the data. All right, and that's getting more audio from the community. That's doing more annotation review. That's just doing more annotations to begin with. Or you can do kind of research and development on the machine learning side, right? Is there a new architecture coming out of academia or coming out of industry that is more sort of efficient, where we can get more bang for our buck, so to speak? And should we try experimenting with that? Or is there some signal processing we can do on the front end before Merlin looks at that spectrogram image? Can we do something to make it clearer or sharper so that it's easier for it to distinguish bird vocalizations from maybe barking dogs or a car driving by? So anyway, there's kind of these two different levers that you can pull, and like as any other project, we always kind of explore both, right? Because like the right comment, like the right solution is some combination of both options. Um, and just to give you guys a sense for like that first that kind of collecting more annotations and collecting more data. This plot shows the last 6 months of annotation activity for the Merlin Sound ID dataset. And you're seeing the number of annotations, and each curve here is a different project. So we break the world down into kind of regional projects. So we have the US and Canada project. We have the Neotropics project, which focuses mainly on South America and Central America. We have the European project. We've recently booted up Australia and Taiwan. So this blue line here is Neotropics. So we have a really energetic and enthusiastic South American coordinator who's rallying a whole bunch of folks down there to do annotations. But in the last 6 months, we've gotten over 800,000 additional boxes, and so we continuously kind of retrain Merlin and just see how we're doing and when are birds ready to be released to the public through the Merlin Bird ID app. I really like this plot because it shows kind of a hidden technical piece that people sometimes are, yeah, unless you're kind of like deep in the world of machine learning and um, sort of species recognition, you don't quite ever appreciate taxonomy changes. So this spike here, every year Cornell updates the Clements bird taxonomy, and we have to propagate those changes to the all of our machine learning models. And so the Clements taxonomy is usually updated by right at the beginning of October of each year, and it takes a while for that thing to propagate through the Cornell databases, and eventually it hits our machine learning data sets, and so we see this huge spike in changes to annotations, and that also triggers model retraining and seeing how the new species are doing, because often there's splits, and we need to look at, do we maintain performance or do we have serious confusions and we need to work on species? Um, so I wanted to just list off a few different tips for using Sound ID, right? So I've been fortunate enough to kick off this project when it started, and then have worked on it kind of continuously for the last 6 years. So I've gotten like fairly good at using the tool. So I just was this afternoon, I was just thinking about kind of like what would be my tips be for maybe not a brand new Merlin user, but like, probably a lot of folks in this audience are relatively experienced birders, or it's new. It's not that they're necessarily brand new to it. So, for that kind of an audience, what would my tips be? And I would say, like, if I'm in an area where I know the birds well, I'm using Sound ID as confirmation, right? Like, I usually start it and I'm holding it while I'm looking in my bins and other things and just doing stuff. And I'll look down every once in a while. And I basically am like, yep, cool. Like, I picked up these birds too. And then every once in a while, like, Merlin will pick up something that I absolutely expect. There's like a tufted titmouse or something. And I'm like, and maybe I'll pause for a second and listen. I'm like, oh, yep, there is a tufted titmouse in the background. Maybe the cardinals or the chickadees are kind of drowning it out. But it's kind of this like sanity checking tool. And often, if you use the Sound ID in a particular area, you kind of, it's a tool, right? And with every tool, you need to practice how to use it and stuff. But you also you kind of get used to like which detections don't feel right, right? And so, in my backyard in Massachusetts, every so often, like during the spring and summertime, we have these issues with false positives of spotted sandpiper. And it's like, every time I look at it, I'm like, okay, like we're still dealing with that issue. I'm not gonna like add that bird to my checklist. It could be that spotted is around somewhere, but I'm skeptical enough where it's not gonna get added to my checklist unless I can go find it and get a visual of it. So when I use Sound ID in a brand new area, I start off very skeptical. I'm like, I don't know the birds well. I'm still learning them. I don't quite have trust in the system. And so I'm looking for consistent patterns between what I hear, what I'm seeing on the spectrogram, and then the detections in the results table, where the detections will flash yellow when that bird's redetected. So I'm looking for like consistency on like, yep, cool, there's the call note. I heard it and Merlin fired on it. Like, okay, now I'm starting to associate that bird with that thing, and I'm building a bit of trust that Merlin's detections there are correct. And of course, it's always really nice if you go out with someone who's a local there who can confirm that Merlin is doing a reasonable job and tell you, where it's struggling and when you should be skeptical. But in general, right, you should be like try to get a visual of the bird, right? That's like the easiest way to just confirm a particular detection. Um, you know, Merlin will just work a lot better if you can somehow reduce your background noise, and that's not always possible. But if you're walking and you just stop for 30 seconds and just hold still and let Merlin get kind of cleaner audio, that might be a nice way to gain some confidence in the detections. And then you need to watch out for mimics, right? So we'll look at a mockingbird here in just a second. Right, those will just throw a whole bunch of cool detections for birds that aren't actually there, but it's impressive to see what the mimic can do. And then, one other tip is, high frequency sounds are tough to hear, right? And so Merlin might be reporting things that you can actually hear. So maybe it's like right now in the woods of Massachusetts, right? Maybe you're hearing a creeper, a brown creeper, or a golden crowned kinglet. Sometimes those things are vocalizing quite high, or even cedar waxwings, right? Um, it's the Merlin's able to like detect those quite reliably. And so it's useful to also know which bird species are vocalizing in those high frequency bands, and really pay attention to the spectrogram, and the detections to get a sense for should you be confident in those suggestions or not. Um, okay, so let's look at this mockingbird. So this is back to our kind of our toy visualization. Um, and this time we've got the video. So video to the sound waveform to the spectrogram that you would see in Merlin, if you had started it up. We have our model input and we have our Merlin predictions. And there'll be some fun mimicry here, and I'll just play this and we can check it out. Okay, so this belted kingfisher vocalization, right, which is actually really good. It's a pretty good imitation, right? It immediately makes Merlin trigger a belted kingfisher, right? And we watched the video, right? That was just the mockingbird doing mimicry. But Merlin doesn't know that, right? Merlin doesn't have eyes. It's just got all it's got is the audio to process. And so there's absolutely things that we could do, we like being the Merlin engineering team, to try to improve this performance. But it incurs a lot of computational complexity, right? So one of the things maybe some of you picked up on, right, is Merlin sees, quote unquote, sees 2 to 3 seconds of audio, on at 1 second intervals, right? So these bars were changing every 1 second. There's not much of a memory there, right? So, if we really wanted to solve this mockingbird problem, we should first, and we can actually go back in this video, right? So the first few vocalizations, the bar was blue. It was like a very classic mockingbird sound, right? And Merlin's got no problem calling it a mockingbird. If we wanted to be a bit more principled with solving this problem, we would kind of store that detection in memory, so to speak. And then when a belted kingfisher vocalization came up, we would probably be a bit more skeptical, and we'd probably be like, wait, we know that there's a mockingbird present. Like, we should probably scrutinize this kingfisher vocalization and really decide if this is a proper new individual coming in, or is it our mockingbird? And then, and again, this is why that go look at the bird kind of advice is always useful for when you've got Sound ID running. If you just see, if you jump back down here, if you see a detection for a species that just doesn't quite make sense for where you are, it could just be a mimic, which is really impressive, and it's fun to look at what they are mimicking. But yeah, get your eyes on the bird, and help confirm the the observation. Um, okay, so then how can you guys help the Sound ID project? One thing is just contributing audio, right? We even though we have lots of audio from the United States and Canada and North America in general, we would like more, right? We need better coverage of a species repertoire throughout the year and throughout its range. When you add an audio file in managed media to your eBird checklist, telling us the background species, right? Like, because you were there in person, you've got kind of all the context. Letting us know what the background species were really helps our annotators quickly annotate a file, right? Otherwise, they're like, it just takes more cognitive effort to listen to it and really think through the different stuff. If the observer just tells us what the background species was, that's a huge leg up in getting through annotations. So anyway, obviously just doing eBird checklists, or even just using Merlin is a huge help. And it's always fun to go outside and see people using the tools. But yeah, if you want to help Sound ID specifically, improve performance. And if you notice problems with it, where it's falsely predicting species, it's not picking up to species, get an audio recording, and add that to your eBird checklist, and it'll help us improve the data set. Eventually, it'll help be used to help train Merlin, and then we can get it back out to you, and hopefully you have a better experience with it. Um, so actually, Whitney, I just want to confirm, I can kind of run through some current and future work, or I can stop here. I wasn't sure on the timing.
Yeah, we still have about 25 minutes. So I think if you wanted to continue for a bit and then leave maybe 15 minutes at the end for questions, that would be plenty.
That's that should be great. Um, so yeah, I hinted at this, right? So one of the big focuses of the team is global expansion. Merlin, the app already covers a huge is basically global, right? We support almost every region of the world with high species information coverage. The Sound ID model is not that, right? So the Sound ID model works great. What you're seeing here is kind of a species coverage. So this is species in the Sound ID model. Um, and each country is colored based off of all the birds that have ever been reported through eBird for that country, right? So this is including vagrants and lots of other stuff. But so we've got great coverage in North America. It's really cool for me to see South America start coming up and being a bit darker, because this has been a lot of effort. Europe is in decent shape. Africa, we have a long ways to go there. We've just got coordinators and folks to help us in Australia and Asia. So yeah, hopefully we'll start seeing some better coverage in other parts of the world. But that's a big focus of the team right now. Um, Two things that just two examples of how we're doing this, right? So one is Grabando Aves. So you can go to these websites, or this website, and check that out. But that's trying to get Latin America out recording birds, getting that audio into eBird and then into the Macaulay libraries, that we can use it to add those species and see how well we're doing on performance. Big year of African sounds. This is another big push for just trying to build up a community of birders local to Africa, get them outside, get those recording, get eBird checklists coming in, and then also get some of those checklists to have audio files. So hopefully we'll start seeing the needle move on data for Africa, and it'd be awesome to support those communities with better Sound ID tools. Um, Mammals and amphibians. We've been asked about this since the inception of the project, and we're finally doing it. I don't have like a concrete timeline to necessarily tell you, but we are now, this is our annotation tool, and now you're starting to see coyotes, toads, frogs, crickets, and other. So yeah, I'm emphasizing mammals and amphibians. We are labeling other taxa when possible, but they're not a priority. Right now, we're really focused on sort of common mammal and frog species currently for North America, and then we'll do a similar thing to what we did with birds, where we'll slowly move on to other parts of the world as well. But I think this will be a really cool way to keep, help show people, like, what all these different sounds are when they go outside, especially like now that I'm on the East Coast. Yeah, the amphibian choruses are just super impressive, and it would be cool to really know all the different species that are contributing to them. I know that there's those in California as well, but I didn't quite get that in suburbia Bakersfield, where I grew up. Hey, you guys can also help on the non bird taxa. So when you add media to your checklists, there's a new section for other animals. So you can add photos, video, audio, and when you drag your audio file into there, then you're given the option of specifying a species, right? So it's not quite the same thing as birds, right? Because you're not giving us a checklist of all the mammals that you saw. First, you drag your audio file in, then you can go and choose, squirrel or coyote or bobcat, or whatever you got a recording of. Um, so I'm a huge cyclist, actually. I grew up riding bikes and racing bikes all over California. Um, this is a prototype of just running Sound ID in your back pocket as you're riding bikes, and seeing where you detect different birds, sort of along your bike ride. So this we kind of prototype these types of tools to see like, is this something that we'd actually want to build and bring into the Merlin app officially? We have a bunch of different dev apps that we've created to kind of test out, which ideas are fun and which ones aren't quite ready for prime time. Similarly, this is that same path, but um, this one is about trying to find, you do a long bike ride or a hike or a walk or something, and you have this challenge of finding the audio snippet that is kind of most clear for a particular bird. So we were prototyping, let's say you've been recording for 3 hours or 2 hours or something, and you picked up 30 species. How do you go find a good, clear vocalization for each one of those species? And I won't play the video, but that's kind of what we were up to here. Um, and I think that's it actually. So I'll stop there. And yeah, thank you guys for having me um, come out, so to speak, and talk.
Yeah, Grant, this was wonderful. I learned so much, and the thing I really didn't know anything about was the annotation process. And my gosh, it looks so heavy human workload there. But I'm going to ask a first question, and then I'm going to get to those in the chat. I'm also really excited about the mammal thing, and I saw in our chat there was a few comments about adding squirrels. So I know that's a big one here in the Bay Area, especially. But I'm wondering, you showed a sort of graph, or like basically it works as a map of all the species on a precision versus their recall grid. And I'm wondering if
Mhm.
is that publicly available so that we can kind of see if a particular species is how well it's doing.
That's a good question. It's currently not, but that is, if that was something that the community wanted to like have more detailed access to, that's definitely something we could provide. And yeah, to be honest, like if someone really wants to nerd out, this is like just the surface of kind of the reporting mechanisms we have. We do like very detailed analyses per species on where it's performing well, where it's not performing well. But yeah, that's cool. We haven't quite asked, we haven't had someone ask us for these things. But that's
Yeah,
something we can definitely do.
I think it would just be fun, sort of like add to the grain of salt kind of thing for some species. And to understand where you are with that. But okay, so let's get to the chat questions. So the first one, some of these you answered, but I think I'm going to read them anyway, just to give a quick recap if you could. So sometimes the bird, Poonam's writes, sometimes the bird call is very loud, but Merlin does not ID the bird. Why does that happen?
So it could be a few things. The species, like my usual, if I didn't know this audience was coming from California, I'd be like, oh, well, it could be the case that that bird's not in the model. Like if I was getting this question from India or Africa or Asia, like that often is, we just don't have that bird in the model. If you're in California and it's not in there, either that's like sort of an exotic species, which maybe the Bay Area, LA definitely has this issue where there's some exotics that are just not in the model yet. But it could be a weird vocalization that Merlin just hasn't had enough training data for, right? So that goes back to that. We still want data even for our U.S. and Canada birds. We need to keep increasing the coverage of their repertoire. Yeah, and there's just diversity. There's just like really cool diversity across a species range. And so we might that recording would be a really good one to add to your checklist and get it into us.
Yeah, okay, so here's a pretty technical one. ANNs typically emphasize texture over object boundaries for object recognition. Your objects are somewhat textural, but is there an analogy in your call recognition that can lead to hallucinations or mis-IDs from fine-grained aspects of the spectrogram rather than the broad outlines of the frequency sweeps and such? Highly technical.
Well, yeah, I mean, so right in with a normal vision problem, we have like the nuisance variables are often like occlusion and scale, right? So like You can like I can like hide part of my face, with a phone, and you still in computer vision, you still got to be able to recognize, me as Grant. In audio, we don't get occlusion, we get like combination, right? So we get the northern cardinal and we get the mockingbird on top of each other, and that's kind of this like new signal that we need to learn that there's still a northern cardinal there and there's still a mockingbird. And so we do actually a lot of this sort of so we try to get clean annotations from our experts, and then during training we actually corrupt the heck out of these things. We're taking audio files all across California and we're adding them together, so that we get kind of a Bay Area noise and an LA noise, and we teach Merlin like, hey, even though we kind of corrupted this signal, these bird species that the experts box are still present and we need you to detect it. So that those features aren't necessarily baked into the architecture of the model. They're kind of encouraged for the model to learn through what we call data augmentation. And we do lots and lots of data augmentation to squeeze as much performance as we can out of the limited data we've got.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, Laura writes, some states like California are very big. Could Merlin add county? Which I think it does. I think you can put in a county there, but tell me if I'm wrong. And then also time of day.
Or maybe on the first question, I could use a clarification. County, like on like which birds are nearby, or like
Right.
getting a regional pack.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Tom, or Laura, if you're here and want to add details to your question there, please do so in the chat. And I'm going to move to the next one in the meantime, which is how does Merlin deal internally with ambiguity? This might be a bird, uh, but I don't know it, or this might be one of the three birds and I can't tell which.
Yep. Yeah, this is a cool question. Okay, so the annotators are able to label through the taxonomy. So all the data I think I showed in these slides were at the species level, but they can use the eBird taxonomy. So they can do slashes, they can do spuzz, and they can go all the way back up to what we call unknown bird as well. So if the expert is just not sure, it's a generic chip noise, could be any number of species, they might just label it as an unknown bird. And we use that in a very special way or in a very careful way, I should say, when we train or evaluate Merlin on files that have those types of boxes. But yeah, so internally, Merlin is able to kind of also predict at those different granularity levels. And so we're trying to only show, when Merlin's confident of a particular species as being present. And actually bringing in the mammals has really kind of pushed us to like think through many of those architecture designs, because now we not need to not only handle you know like coarser granularity of bird species, we need to handle other taxonomic groups as well. And actually I didn't add it in the current work, but we're actually going the other direction now too. So um yeah, I don't have timelines on this one. This is definitely like more of a fun thing right now. But we're pushing to vocalization types. So take a species like northern cardinal. We now have internal models that will tell us whether it's the song that we're hearing, or the call note, or the territory display. And so, if we can get kind of that system working, we'll be able to surface that in Merlin as like, hey, you just heard this breeding song of Northern Cardinal, and we'll be able to tell the user a bit more information about why the bird's doing that and the relevance of it. So that will also be kind of fun once we can get that out.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed a question here. So, this brings up a good point that different phones seem to hear differently when using Merlin. So I think it all depends on your microphone and your phone. Is that true?
It does, yes. And so one of the other tips if you're out birding with other people or walking with other people or biking with other people, we often will like have multiple phones running Sound ID, and we're often just double checking like what's the overlap, what species did both phones get, what species did this one phone get, and should we have looked for that, or did anyone actually get a confirmation of that species. um my partner's phone is like often cleaner than mine. Mine has like a ton of lint like often shoved into the microphone like holes. And so yeah, like you could try to clean stuff out. Your case, all these phone cases can be quite bulky, and they can help, or they can cover up the microphone and really dampen the noise. You can get an external mic for phones. So if you're really looking to like squeeze the most performance out of Merlin, getting a little external mic that plugs into your USB-C port on your phone is a really nice way to boost performance.
Yeah, that's a great tip, especially if you have a phone that doesn't have the best microphone already. Okay, so how can AI speed the work you are doing and or improve accuracy on the phone?
Um, yeah, so it's funny. I come from a generation of researchers that are often call AI machine learning. And so I would say that we've been kind of utilizing these techniques um, for the lifespan of the project, and we'll keep kind of staying abreast of what's going on in academia and in industry to take advantage of new ideas when they come out. But yeah, the the whole pipeline I would say is like quite modern. So we try to be very intelligent about which files. So the human experts are our most valuable resource. Besides, I mean, if you had to rank things, I mean, I'm not saying that the eBird community isn't the most valuable. That is our first piece, and maybe that is the most valuable, right? We need audio coming into us, and the next big piece is that those human experts actually draw the boxes, and so we're quite careful with utilizing their time as much as we can. And so there's a fun sampling process about which audio files do we want to annotate. Are we like how much in that file do we want annotated? And all those decisions utilize some form of machine learning or AI to help make those decisions to kind of get data through the pipelines as quickly as possible. But yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I like, I think we're staying abreast of that stuff as best we can.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that that Merlin doesn't use heavy data processing to using up a lot of resources. So that's
Yeah.
um, okay. So the next question is how does Merlin do with birds like white-crowned sparrow that have very localized vocalizations or sounds?
Yeah, that's one of these species. So it's a species that works well on its kind of general vocalizations, but anytime it starts specializing, you can see the performance, the recall, sort of, so Merlin's ability to even detect that bird kind of drops off, and that's where we want those additional vocalizations, and that's where we try hard. So there's so many fun little pieces of this project, right? But the eBird team is really interested in making these beautiful maps of species ranges, right? And then their status and trends across those ranges, right? Is their abundance trending up or is it trending down? I'm really interested in those range maps and abundance maps because it helps me understand where the different birds are and have we sampled any audio from like kind of the full extents of the range. So something like white-crowned sparrows, and not all species exhibit that same amount of variability across their range, but if we know a species does exhibit that variability, then we do try to like double, triple, quadruple the amount of training data and evaluation data that we're annotating for that species so that we can make decisions on its performance.
Yeah, great. I think it was helpful to see your sampling map at the beginning of the presentation to kind of understand that too. Okay, so a couple questions from when you were talking about mimics. So with mimics, some of them, like your example, didn't sound like the mockingbird example, didn't sound quite right or sounded mockingbirdish in the pattern. What are the
Yeah.
making that prediction or ID better?
So we actually don't. Okay, so this question gets us back into deep into the weeds of this project. We currently do not. We kind of ignore situations where a species is doing mimicry in the file, and we don't try to teach Merlin like, hey, this is actually a northern mockingbird doing a kingfisher. We because Maybe because it's just really confusing for the model to learn. It's like wait, like I'm seeing this signal here, but I'm seeing this other signal here, and now somehow they're different. So this is part of the motivation for actually doing these vocalization types. What we'd like to do is label like that kingfisher mimicry as such. Like, hey, this is a mockingbird, but it's doing a belted kingfisher mimicry. Um, and that's just a whole nother level of annotation that we haven't quite delved into. But that again, that's kind of like the stuff that we would need to do to really handle those mimicry well. Um, when we first kind of released the tool, we had like long conversations about Mockingbird and like should we include it in the model? Should we not include it in the model when we release it to the public? And it's funny, like we for people who are kind of new to birding, I actually like that it can kind of rattle off the birds that are being mimicked because it's actually just really impressive. It's like, wow, a mockingbird is really freaking cool that it can do all this mimicry. Then as soon as that user becomes a bit more skilled in birding, it stops becoming kind of cool and it's actually like, come on, Merlin, like what like it's just that mockingbird. So we have these different user segments and like one of the things I'd love to do with the eBird app, for example, is put in a different version of Sound ID, right? That's probably a bit more precise, and it's not so concerned about getting results on the screen to keep a kind of a new Merlin user engaged. Like that's like one of the things that um, um that we try to communicate is like the Sound ID model is actually very flexible. You can export it for a particular experience in Merlin, and you could also export it for a particular version in eBird or some other system, right? That demands a higher precision before showing results. It's not something that the eBird team and the Merlin team have ever like decided to like get together and like make progress on, but that's definitely something that we could do in the future.
Well, okay, Sam writes, do recordings saved in Merlin Bird ID, like in the app, I assume, get sent to they say Sound ID here, but I think they probably mean the Macaulay library, or do they need to
Right.
be exported and uploaded via eBird?
Currently, they need to be exported and uploaded via eBird. Yeah, so Cornell right now we do not grab any data off of your device without kind of, yeah, with it from Merlin. Like in some sense, Merlin is actually like a little bit of a black hole. People can grab the model, they can download those regional packs or all the packs of the world, and then they can do whatever they want with the stuff. And Cornell's not going to be grabbing data from you. Um, eBird obviously is a data ingestion portal, right? So there, like everything's optimized to get data from the community. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we continue to have plans of making it easier for people to contribute directly from Merlin into the Macaulay library. One point on that is, I know, maybe it sounds like I'm saying different things at different points of this talk, but we do. So why haven't we just like kind of flipped that switch and let all the Merlin users contribute audio? It's a little bit unclear how we would really take advantage of all of the cell phone data right now. Like we want cell phone data, we want to evaluate on it, we want to train on it, but it's really hard. Like it's very easy or I mean, it's easier to annotate a high quality audio recording that was collected with a shotgun mic or a parabola or something and contributed through eBird, right? We can get that to an expert. They're not losing their mind trying to like tease apart like the car driving past and the bird sound and everything else. I mean, it's still hard for other reasons, but the cell phone recordings were like a little cautious on just kind of like opening up that gate without having a bit more tools in place to really find those cell phone files that we think a human expert could review, give us some confirmation on the label so that we can then use it for training or evaluation. And like I hinted at, right, we do take these high quality recordings that are annotated and we corrupt the heck out of them, right? So going that direction is easy, right? You can take high quality, you can corrupt the heck out of it, and you can turn it into a low quality recording, and you still have all the same boxes. But going the other direction is super hard. Going from a low quality recording and getting the initial boxes on that is like pretty painstaking. And so that's part of the reason we haven't just like immediately flipped that switch, so to speak, on getting a bunch of data from Merlin.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, can Merlin make use of recordings from other devices besides iPhones? So, or excuse me, phones. So for example, they have a wildlife recorder, and can they somehow pump that into Merlin?
Oh, so Merlin can, like, you can import audio into Merlin if you just want to analyze and get results there. There's if you go into, I believe the let's just double check. So if you go into your Sound ID sessions, I believe you can import from there. And actually, Merlin's just a target for audio, both on Android and on iOS. So if you like open up your audio file in your Files app, you can usually select Merlin as the target to receive it. Now, if the question was like, can you contribute audio from those other sources to the project? Same thing applies. You can get that into an eBird checklist and get that up into eBird, and then it will contribute to our data sets.
Great. Yeah, we're coming up on time, but I think we have a cut time for a couple more questions. I feel like we're getting some really great questions and more questions than we usually get, which I think is a sign of a great presentation. Great topic. Okay, so Aaron writes, any plans to use Merlin to produce some of its own training data or initial segmentation to speed hand annotation?
Yep, yep. And we do that. Yes. So that's like another one. That's a great idea. And that's another one of these things where like we're utilizing kind of these AI or ML workflows to try and speed up this process. And so yeah, it's funny. I should have put a few more screenshots of the tool, but in the tool where people were drawing boxes, we also have suggestions on what we think, like what Merlin thinks is present. So it kind of helps the annotators who might not be familiar with that particular location figure out what those background species are.
Okay, I'm going to skip to this question because I'm personally interested, but we're at time. But last question. Can you talk about the relationship between Merlin and BirdNet?
Oh, cool. Yeah, so BirdNet is yeah, so these are so for folks who aren't aware, so they're the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, right, is quite a large lab. There's 300 people that work there. So BirdNet is a project that actually predates the Merlin Sound ID project. And its focus is kind of on researcher use cases. So researchers are out putting up what we call ARUs. These are autonomous recording units, and they're collecting data at like a study site over weeks or even months, right? And then they want to come back to their laptop or their server, and they want to analyze all of the audio that was collected. And so the BirdNet team has been really focused on like that angle of the problem. The Sound ID project was from the get-go was always focused on like real-time identification in Merlin. And so it's the like the high level answer to that question is just like these are just two different teams at the Lab of Ornithology with kind of two different focuses on what they're after. One was really focused on a kind of a research scientist use case, and the other one was focused on kind of a general public use case. And so those initial um, requirements were different enough that we just have kind of had these two projects running in parallel. And BirdNet continues to serve the research community in a really great way. Their models and tooling is, open source on GitHub. Merlin is the Sound ID model is accessible through Merlin right now. That's kind of like that's how you access this thing. Yeah, and so they've just continued to evolve in these different directions. But yeah, both. I guess the similarity is they both are interested in analyzing audio, but then the differences become quite big from there.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you again so much. This was wonderful. We really appreciate your time and all your expertise. And I can't wait to, start adding background species and helping out more with the data. So thank you all. Thanks everybody who attended, and thank you, Grant, for being here. And happy
Yeah,
birthday.
my pleasure. Yeah, thank you guys.
Okay. Have a good night, all. All right. Thanks, Grant. That was really wonderful. And thanks for staying a little late. I know you're
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's fun. I'm always happy to come back if you guys